In 2012, From Software's Hidetaka Miyazaki said that they are weighing up pros and cons of adding an easy mode to Dark Souls, the notoriously difficult action RPG series. The statement was met with an outrage from the Souls fan community, as they think adding difficulty modes would destroy everything the Souls series stands for. This made the game director retract the statement and probably any thoughts of adding an easy mode alongside it. Since then, should Dark Souls have an easy mode became a pretty often discussed philosophical question, to which I'll provide my version of the answer in this video. My name is Stanislav Kostyuk, and welcome to Farlands, a series about video games and video game design. Today, we're going to talk about the nature of difficulty levels, why Dark Souls should have an easy mode, and why that mode, if done right, would be different from what fans imagine it to be. But we need to start a bit from afar. What is a game in the first place? A game is a set of rules and mechanics wrapped inside some context created by the visuals, sound, narrative, and everything else, all set to provide a certain experience to the player. Assassin's Creed is about being a blade in the crowd, striking down your target and disappearing among the people. Journey is about, well, a journey and the inner growth that comes with it. And Dark Souls is about the satisfaction of overcoming intense challenges that you face on the way. You can go more in depth with a description of each experience, of course, but the point is all the elements of a game work together to provide one to the player. Out of that experience, though, it is just the rules and mechanics that can have certain difficulty, as they are what provide challenges. It is important to understand that difficulty is a relative concept. It is the difference between the skill required to overcome a challenge and the player's actual skill. And the challenge doesn't have to be based on speed or quick reaction. It can be a strategic challenge, like let's say in Civilization, or a logical challenge, like in puzzle or adventure games, or even a creativity challenge in some cases. The bigger the gap between player skill and required skill, the harder the challenge. But player skill is not static. With each attempt to overcome the challenge, it increases. In other words, players learn. And if the player repeats the same challenge over and over again, they can raise their skill until a certain point above the obstacle's required skill level. If that happens, then the obstacle becomes easy for that particular player. With that in mind, we can understand why difficulty levels exist, as if we take a challenge and provide it to a bunch of players with varied skill levels, some will find that challenge easy, some will find it hard, and some will find it just right. But if we make several versions of that challenge, modifying the rules in a way that some variations need more skill and some less, we create difficulty levels that make sure each player can take on the version of the challenge that fits them. And as we remember, players learn, so somebody started on an easier difficulty can learn enough to then switch to a harder difficulty, and so on until they reach the hardest variation of the challenge. To be fair, this is all still pretty broad, as I haven't touched upon a bunch of concepts like players' skill thresholds, different ways games can handle difficulty and progression, and the fact that not all games need difficulty levels in the first place, and some other points, but this should be enough to lay the groundwork for the conversation. Now that we've talked about the concepts of difficulty, player skill, and active learning, let's take a closer look at difficulty scaling. A lot of people think difficulty scaling is just a matter of changing variables, like let's say players' health and damage and enemies' health and damage. But this kind of scaling doesn't work even for all action games, as just changing these parameters doesn't necessarily provide the same experience but with a lower difficulty. Not to mention that depending on the mechanics in question, scaling needs to work differently. But let's take a look at games where just switching variables kind of work. If we take a particular type of first-person shooter games, like let's say Call of Duty, playing with the variables of player health and damage and enemy health, damage and accuracy is enough to provide good difficulty levels. All Call of Duty difficulty levels make you feel like a soldier in the midst of battle, and the main skill comes from the ability to point and shoot at things and to avoid being shot at. Let's say you're a person who has never played games before and decide to try out Call of Duty on Rookie difficulty. What you need to learn to not just play well but even progress through the game is to aim at people's bodies and shoot at them. And as you go through the game, you get better and better at it. Because of the health variables, you might not use cover as much as in other difficulty modes, but still there's a situation with a big amount of enemies, so not always staying in the open is something you'll also learn at least a bit. And by the end, you receive the Call of Duty bombastic action experience, got to feel yourself as an action soldier, and also get better at the mechanics. So when you play the same game again, or maybe the next Call of Duty, you're more prepared for what's to come, are more efficient at shooting, have better reaction time, generally are a better player, and will feel more confident trying out the normal difficulty, which in turn will make you an even better player. On another end of the difficulty scale and spectrum, there are games that require absolutely new authored content to allow for more difficulty levels. An example of that is the Mega Monkey mode from Curse of Monkey Island, where there are more puzzles required to achieve certain tasks. At one point, you need to get a shaky golden tooth from a pirate. On normal difficulty, you need to give him a gum which he loves, and pop the gum bubble which would have the tooth inside. And now you have a tooth. On Mega Monkey mode, however, the pirate won't let you just leave with that tooth, and you need to find a way to get it out of the building without the pirate noticing. It is important to understand that different difficulty levels need to provide the same sort of experience as on the default intent and difficulty, just scaled down or up to accommodate players with different skill levels. The Last of Us, in its different difficulty settings, does one very important thing aside to changing health, damage and amount of resources found. It is changing how the AI behaves itself. Enemies on easier difficulty levels are more forgiving in terms of missteps during stealth sections and are more straightforward in combat, while on hardest ones they're extremely sharp. But even on the easiest difficulty level, the clickers kill you in one hit. Fear of the infected is something core to the Last of Us experience, and even the easiest difficulty level does not remove that from inexperienced players. With all that in mind, it is easy to understand why the fans of the Souls series and Souls-like games are very wary of introducing new difficulty levels, especially easier ones, into these sorts of games, as facing a challenge that you need to work hard to overcome is core to the experience, and just switching up health and damage variables can create a mode that absolutely ruins it. And it is a valid concern. In fact, there is one game that shows clearly what all Souls fans are afraid of when it comes to easy mode: Furi. Furi is a game about challenging boss battles. There is nothing in it other than boss battles, and to defeat them you need to learn the enemy attack patterns on each stage of the boss battle and how to deal with them. More than that, there is a lot of general skill based on precise timing for counters, dodges and other things. The core experience is done very well, but the game also has an easy mode that absolutely misses the point. The easy mode is called Promenade, and when you try to select it, be it at the beginning or if you encounter a boss you can defeat and think of switching to an easier difficulty level, it warns you that you won't feel the same rush of combat. And it's right. Because not only the mode raises your health and damage levels to ridiculous degrees and really decreases the health of the bosses, it also removes most of the stages for each boss. So not only you won't go through a proper boss battle experience, you also won't learn anything by the end and won't be prepared for the default difficulty level in any way. So how should difficulty level scaling work for a game like Furi? The aspect that is the most challenging is the speed of bullets and timing between when the enemy telegraphs an attack and actually does it. Those things need to be slowed down, so the player would have more reaction time to learn to understand what they need to do. What that means is that if the player defeats a boss with slower timing, as they've already learned enough, they'll be better prepared to defeat the same boss with the default timing. It's like learning to play a song on the piano. Players' health can be raised to allow more room for mistakes, but in no way should the enemies be faster to kill or whole stages removed, because that destroys the intended experience and players still need to work their way up to defeating the boss to feel the satisfaction of victory. Easy difficulty mode should not be about a walk in the park. It should be about providing the intended gameplay to a more inexperienced audience and allow them to learn. And now we get back all the way to Dark Souls. People are afraid if Dark Souls by adding the easy mode will just go the way of increasing health and damage exponentially, which will ruin the intended experience. But just like Furi, Dark Souls easy mode should not be about that. Just like with Furi, first and foremost it should be about timing, that an enemy sits in crouching position a little bit longer before leaping, that he stays with the sword up in the air for more than a couple frames. Easy mode in Dark Souls should not be about enemies that take no effort to defeat, it should be about enemies that are easier to understand and react to for more inexperienced players. What one can also do is to either remove the permanent loss of souls after second death, or remove, like, let's say 25% with each death or something like that. Death should still be an important part of the game, but it could be made less punishing to allow more room for mistakes, which is an important part of learning. In the end, you'll have a mode that for experienced Dark Souls players might feel like a walk in the park, but for newer players will be much easier to get into while retaining the experience of having challenges to overcome and getting to understand what the game is actually about. But this is an answer to the question of what a Dark Souls easy mode should approximately look like. We still need to talk about why this is important in the first place. The answer is accessibility. Remember when we talked about learning and the difference between skill required and player's actual skill? If the difference is too big, learning either does not occur at all or occurs very slowly. And there are a lot of people who are interested in the concept of Dark Souls game experience, but difficulty for them is just way too high to be able to get into it. Yes, there are a select few who will still push their way up, but their numbers are very few. By providing a properly done easy mode, more players will be able to get into the series and become fans, which ultimately is good both for the developers and the game community, and is why Dark Souls and other hardcore games should have an easy mode. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and feel free to leave any comments below. Do you agree with the thoughts and concepts talked about in this video, or do you think that the approach also is against the principles of the Souls series? And if you'd like, consider support my work on Patreon. A special thank you goes to Paolo Di Stefano. It is very appreciated. Thank you very much.